Humans are putting nature at risk. A major report warns 1 million species face the threat of extinction from deforestation to overfishing and development. The consequences will be dire, but can this trend be reversed or at least halted? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. Life on Earth is in decline, with more species threatened with extinction than at any other time in history, and we are to blame. That's part of the findings of a UN agency responsible for assessing the state of our planet. Almost 500 experts worked together over 3 years. Destruction of natural habitats, the felling of trees, climate change, pollution and plunder of the land and sea are all singled out as major drivers of the decline. Around 1 million plant and animal species face extinction, many within decades if we don't act. The report's authors believe the decline can be slowed and in some cases even stopped, but it'll need a global commitment to make that change. Joining me now are our guests. On Skype from Hamburg, Christoph Thies, a campaigner for Greenpeace Germany and an ecology chemistry scientist. In Gainesville, Florida, Brett Sheffers, assistant professor at the Department of Wildlife Ecology and Conservation at the University of Florida. And also on Skype in Arizona, John Wiens, professor at the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Arizona. I welcome you all. I'd like to start with you, Brett Sheffers, in Gainesville, Florida. 1 million species, that's an extraordinary number. The UN says that it's going to need a global commitment to try and either reverse that or at the very least try and slow it down. It's a global commitment we haven't had so far. Is it too late?
I think that's a really important question to ask. 1 million species is a large number. It's not insurmountable. We have existing agreements in place. We have the UN, this Biodiversity Ecosystem Servants panel is there to monitor the state of nature. But we have sustainable development goals. We have a variety of UN agreements already in place that, if taken seriously, could make a difference and take the step in the right direction.
I think that's crucial, isn't it? Let's bring in John Wiens here. Those agreements need to be taken seriously, but it doesn't seem to me that they are being taken seriously. Is that true, do you think?
It would be nice if everyone was on board for the Paris Climate Accord. One of the most important things there is emphasizing protecting tropical rainforests, because that's sort of a kind of one-stop shopping for biodiversity. If you can preserve those forests, you'll preserve thousands upon thousands of species, maybe 50, 67% of species on the planet, and simultaneously reduce the effects of global warming. They're a great big sink for carbon. They'll suck it out of the atmosphere if they can be preserved.
If they can be preserved. Christoph Thies in Hamburg. Greenpeace, obviously a very important organisation since I can remember, and clearly since the 60s, since Greenpeace were formed, you have been talking about the environment. However, it's not just about organisations like yours. There needs to be a real international organisational change to try and do something about this. But what I'm seeing is America pull out of the Paris Accords. We have the UK pulling out of the EU, or at least trying to pull out the EU. Those organisations like the EU, like the United Nations, that are crucial to get all of the countries together, seem to be getting weaker and weaker. Is that a problem, do you think?
That is a massive problem that we are currently facing. We are seeing inadequate implementation of the Paris Climate Agreement. Now we are seeing this IPBES report about the devastating state of nature, clearer than any report ever before. And it must be a wake-up call to first, in the next year, at the Nature Protection Summit in China, at the conference of the Biological Diversity Convention, to agree a very strong and binding deal for nature as well, and then really also implement the climate agreement and the to-be-agreed deal for nature together. and not at the expense of each other. Then this requires major steps in the right direction of governments in most countries of the world that we are not yet seeing. But we will do our very best that this report really serves as a strong wake-up call and is not, getting lost in shelves.
A strong wake-up call. Brett Scheffers, I mean, nobody seems to be waking up. Everybody pays lip service and says, we do need to do something about climate change, and then nobody really does anything about climate change.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I mean, the bottom line is that we're seeing these issues because we have a growth-based economy, and this is an economy that requires mining, natural resource extraction, et cetera, and agriculture development. And these have direct negative consequences for nature. And so, this is a quality of life issue, and it's an issue of doing and having this quality of life in a sustainable way. And there haven't really been sufficient checks and balances in the past to try to do this in a responsible way forward. I think we have the information now, the science is there to guide us moving forward to make the right decisions and to make sure that we minimize the impacts on the environment while we do kind of the necessary extractions to support the economy.
John Wiens, I've heard an argument, I want to put it to you. Nature adapts. It changes with the environment that it's in. And all of this talk of climate change and all of this talk of a million species perhaps being extinct, surely we're treating nature with kid gloves. It's a lot tougher than we give it credit for.
I think, well, it's if you sort of say nature in general, it's sort of nature will survive, but nature could still survive, but we could still lose a million species and seriously damage our quality of life. And I think there's abundant evidence that things are not adapting quickly enough. So some work that I've done summarizing work on range shifts suggests that if you look across 1,000 species or 976 species that their ranges have been monitored over time, there's already been local extinction in about 47% of them. So already we're seeing species starting to go extinct locally just from the limited amount of climate change that we've had so far. So it seems like species are not adapting to that.
I'm going to ask a question here of Christoph Thies. Christoph, yes, you are concerned about what's going on right now. Yes, you want international organizations to step up, to do more, for there to be stronger legislation. However, we are in a global economy that requires almost infinite growth with a planet with finite resources. There has to be a business element to this as well. You can't simply say, we need to stop this from happening. You need to be realistic and say, yes, business takes place. That's bad for the planet, but that's our planet. That's our system.
That's true, that we need to do business. We need economies to provide our existence. But nobody forces us to take air flights every week or drive with our car every day. We still can decide ourselves what we consume and how much. And nobody globally in our political economic system forces us to an ever-growing economy at the expense of nature. We are already consuming 2 planets, and we only have one. And this is the very reason why, if we continue like this, we will lose this 1 million species and probably even more in the longer term. But we haven't lost these species yet. And if we change our activity and stop this forced growth on a global scale, and instead reward economic activities that protect ecosystems and use them more sustainably. And if we really punish activities that destroy our oceans, our forests, our peatlands and grasslands, and remove subsidies that create such a destruction, we can do it. Nobody forces us to continue with these destructive economies we see today. We can change it.
We can change it. I see you nodding in agreement there, John Weens in Tucson. However, we can change it, but this requires not just a lifestyle change. It requires a whole new way of thinking for most people on the planet. We're talking nearly, 8 billion people on the planet now? How's that going to work?
I think that, well, you can think, one way you can think about it is that almost everything we do contributes to global warming, contributes to biodiversity loss. But you can also think about it that for everything we can do, we can tweak what we do in a way that will lessen those impacts, right? So one of the most obvious things that we think about is what we eat. So beef and lamb and goat are particularly bad for the environment. A plant-based diet is particularly good for the environment. The ways that we drive and get around, all of those things we can make slight changes, take shorter hot showers, things like that. There's just a whole list of things that we can do that will make things better. And I think Christoph makes a great point, is that we can sort of, the choices that we make as consumers, we can reward those companies that are environmentally friendly and punish those that aren't. So I think that everybody can sort of take part in this and contribute.
Brett Scheffer's in Gainesville. Me taking a shorter hot shower, you can't legislate for that. You can't make laws for that. So what I really want to get at is there's two solutions that seemingly you guys are talking about. There's the micro solution, a lifestyle change that we can all do, or there has to be a macro solution at a governmental, international level. But there's another solution, isn't there? Surely there's a scientific solution to all of this. The science community should be able to present not just the bad news, but some solutions as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. We are becoming, with every decade, better at restoring kind of degraded landscapes, engineering landscapes to help deal with these issues. Our agriculture is becoming more efficient. So there's kind of technology that can be kind of researched and developed at a macro scale. And these can be implemented, in a collaborative way. I mean, part of this whole United Nations, this network of countries, is to get buy-in from a variety of countries, the developed world, as well as those that are developing economies. And I think that kind of boundary discussion and sharing of resources is the way forward. But I can't really speak to, so this report that was released, they talk about transformative technologies, transformative ways forward. And I think that's going to require, a very serious conversation with economists, with natural scientists, with policymakers to try to find a way forward. I don't think there is a clear-cut, easy solution to that. I think real difficult decisions are going to have to be made.
Christoph Thies in Hamburg. There's a geopolitical element to all of this as well. The big countries, America, Russia, China, India, to a certain extent, Brazil, are all in competition with each other to try and be the preeminent economies within the world itself. So you've got these big countries who are competing with each other for the resources of our planet. However, none of them seem to be talking to each other in a real way when it comes to a macro level of trying to do something about environmental issues. That can't be sustainable. That has to change. What's Greenpeace's role? What's environmental activists' role in trying to make that change? You can't simply be jumping on boats in the middle of the North Atlantic anymore. You have to do something a bit more political now, surely.
Our role clearly is to use scientific information like this very, very good and comprehensive report of IPBES about the status of nature and transform this into public education, public information, into political pressure and influence, and I absolutely agree with you. It's very concerning to see a growing rivalry between many governments and a growing number of very populistic governments, not very much interested in cooperation. That is something that urgently needs to be changed. We need to go back to a path where we have more multilateralism again and more cooperation, and also to tackle enormous inequalities in the world between rich people becoming richer and poor people becoming poorer. While I said that we all still have choices to protect and restore our nature or to destroy it, we have a growing number of very poor people who have no choice. They are fighting for their daily survival and probably are forced to destroy some of the resources. But the vast majority of resources is being consumed by a very small part of the world. Maybe 10% is consuming more than 50% of the global resources. And we have to tackle the very wasteful lifestyles of the richest part of the planet as well. So these are two very big prerequisites: to have more international cooperation politically between governments and overcome the enormous inequalities in the world.
Brett Scheffers in Gainesville, is it simply that we can blame the rich? It's their fault, they consume far too much?
Well, yeah, I guess you could blame, you could blame the rich, I guess. I mean, when we talk about a global economy and a global scale, I mean, it's difficult to quantify who is the rich. I mean, the rich is, the United States. We have global economies that are so Brazil and China, they are now major players. So yeah, I mean, when you have a number like 1% or 5% of the population consuming 50% of the population, that's an amazing number. And then you have the rest of the population who are living far below that standard of living. And they're mainly kind of living on the land, so to speak, agricultural, agrarian kind of lifestyles. And this shouldn't be a surprise that, from that report, it talked about 3/4 of all land is currently severely altered and degraded. And that's because, there's a need for small-scale agricultural subsistence. People just trying to grow enough food to survive. And so there is kind of equity is not evenly kind of spread across the earth. So
but you can
speak.
understand, Brett,
and
I'll bring you all in here.
major
But you can understand, Brett, that what you're talking about is incredibly alarming to the status quo. This is about making money. This is about business. This is about growth, keeping people in jobs, all of that sort of stuff. And what you're talking about seems to be not just a political change, but a lifestyle change and perhaps even an ideological change. Are you getting anybody in, let's take, for example, your government, actually listening to you when you talk like that?
I mean, I think that the fact that we have these big multinational panels to kind of try to rectify these issues, and you get buy-in, from a variety of countries, means that at least they're listening. Whether they actually, so the climate accord, it had almost a global buy-in to try to solve the climate change crisis. Now, granted, the United States has pulled out, but initially it was part of the signatories, and so I think these issues have the ear of the developing countries, but executing it is where we're falling short. And ultimately, it's a really tough issue, and I cannot provide the answer to that question. It's a really complicated question.
It is a very complicated issue. John Weens, I want to bring you in here in Tucson. How do you sell this? I have been listening to very powerful arguments from the three of you. It seems to make sense to certainly anybody who's concerned about environmental issues, but how do you sell this to governments?
I think that there's already some enthusiasm in our government for protecting the environment and stopping climate change. There's talk of this Green New Deal, and so it's clearly the U.S. government is not monolithic and is not monolithically opposed
But
to
it did pull
protecting
out of
the
the
environment.
Paris Climate Change Agreement Accords. It did do that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, when Obama was president, he was one of the people that was, pushing for that, and we've ostensibly pulled out, but that doesn't have to stay that way.
Christoph Thies in Hamburg, let me bring you in here. Organisations such as yours, the ones that are highlighting climate change, oftentimes you have been accused of scaremongering rather than providing solutions. Is it time for a tactical change for organisations like yours in the light of this biodiversity report and the fact that we may lose 1 million species? Surely it's time to change your message. You need to provide solutions and give some hope to people.
We have to provide solutions as well, and we have done so, and we will do more in the future. But we also, of course, need to alert about the problem, and a report like this helps a lot. That just to give you one example, if you read the report, you see how the destruction of ecosystems creates massive emissions and is driving a runaway climate change. And climate change, in turn, is one of the major threats to ecosystems and nature and species. So they are linked in a double way. And at the same time, there is also the positive message and the solution. The very moment we stop to destroy ecosystems and restore and conserve them better, particularly forests, but also peatland and coastal marine areas, to name a few, we can make a massive contribution to reduce emissions and increase the carbon dioxide uptake. So that can be about a third of total climate change mitigation through those kind of nature-based climate mitigation solutions. So there is, because of the strong link between biodiversity and nature on one side and our climate on the other side, there is ample of room for solutions. And those solutions also include modern high technology and innovation. We can do so much better in using less water in agriculture and a better way of using organic nutrients in a more efficient way. We can deal with our forests much better. We can log in a more clever way and let the ecosystem grow and take up carbon dioxide.
Sorry, Christoph, we are running out of time. I don't mean to cut you off, but we are running out of time. And I do want to get to our other guests as well. Just very quickly, I'm going to ask this to all three of you, starting with you, Brett, in Gainesville. Is it too late, or can we change? Yes or no?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm. We can absolutely change, and I think there's a lot of there's lots of signs that we're moving in the right direction. So I do think there is hope.
John Wiens in Tucson, can we change? Yes or no?
Yes, we can, absolutely. And I think actually that a lot of the attention that this UN report has gotten is, I think, is a great sign. It's been big news, and I hope that it will be a tipping point, and that people and governments will start to change and will start to do something about this problem.
Christoph Thies, you've heard there from the scientists. They say we can change. Do you believe the world can change?
I believe the world can change. It can do that very quickly, deal with our forests and oceans and other lands much better. And that can have a very quick, good effect on slowing the biodiversity loss rate and also the rate of climate change.
I want to thank you all. Clearly, there's a lot to talk about, but we're not all doomed, according to our guests, Christoph Thies, John Wiens and Brett Scheffers. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.